Are you running the show today?
Good morning. It is 2 minutes until 9, so if the board members can please take their seats, so we'll be ready to start at 9 o'clock. Good morning. It is 9 o'clock, and so I would like to call to order the March 4th, 2020 meeting of the Indiana State Board of Education. Roll call, please.
Mr. Durham. Dr. Ernest.
Present.
Dr. Freitas.
Here.
Mr. Jackson.
Here.
Mr. Mapes.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Yes, sir.
Here.
Ms. Moe.
Here.
Ms. Rensler.
Here.
Mr. Walker.
Present, sort of.
Mr. Watts.
Thank you. If you would, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as written?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. Statement from the chair. Good morning. We would like to welcome our Butler School of Education students who are here with us and their faculty members who have brought them to be with us here today for our board meeting. So you will see a large group of students towards the back, and we just want to thank them for all of their hard work and for being with us this morning. Any board member comments or reports? Okay, seeing none, we're ready for public comment. No public comment. Moving on then to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
And I will go ahead and make a record of the consent agenda, which includes item A, annual school accreditation placements, and item B, placement of 2018-19 school letter grades. We have a motion to approve. In a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. New business, item A,
Katie,
choice.
did we miss the minutes?
I'm sorry, thank you, Pat. Motion to approve the minutes of the February 2020 meeting.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion in a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Moving on to new business, item A, choice scholarship waiver, Calumet Christian School.
Board members, good morning. Calumet Christian School has petitioned the Indiana State Board of Education for a waiver of choice scholarship consequence. So just as a quick refresh, a private school that accepts choice scholarship students may not continue to accept choice scholarship students if they have a certain number of consecutive D's or F grades. In order to be able to accept students again, they have to achieve a either 1, 2, or 3 C grades in a row, depending on where they are in the consequence. where there are consequences. The other option is they can come to the state board per statute and ask for a waiver of those consequences if, and the law reads, a majority of students have shown improvement by prior year. So I received this petition and reviewed it from Calumet, which is a K-12 school up in Griffith, Indiana, sort of around Tony's neck of the woods. And I looked at this through the lens of justifications that the board has previously approved, including this very school last year. So there are three bases for the recommendation to grant the waiver. Number one is an improvement in total points that is significant, which is about half a letter grade. Number two, if you remove the N size, and this statute again requires that we look at all students, so we take the N size down to 0, this school would have received a C letter grade. And then lastly, we look, and the board has looked and approved these waivers based on growth data. So if you look at standard and high growth combined, they are above 50% across the board. So for those three reasons, both individually and together, the staff recommends the board approve the waiver, and we do have representatives from the school here to answer questions.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Dr. Ernest,
Yes.
Dr. Freitas,
Yes.
Mr. Gastineau,
Yes.
Mr. Mays,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Superintendent McCormick,
No.
Ms. Moe,
Yes.
Ms. Rentler,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
yes,
waiver is approved 8-1.
Thank you. Item B, approval of updates to Indiana's academic standards.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You should have been sent all of the Indiana academic standards that were up for review on a 6-year cycle. I'm sure you did not print them and bring them all with you because I do not see stacks of paper in front of you all, so hopefully you had a chance to look them over. As required, we used committees of teachers from the field that came together for all the subject areas and all the grade levels to look at our current Indiana academic standards and review them for revisions that may or may not be needed. This has been going on, a process for 14 months with several meetings with our educators and our staff putting those together in the format that was sent to you. And we have worked very hard to keep some alignment with our Indiana academic standards so that we don't keep moving the target on our teachers. When we bring educators together, what they ask for is consistency. Over the last many years, with a change to Common Core, then away from Common Core, it has been a moving target for teachers to prepare lessons and get expert with instruction. So we worked with teachers to make the required reviews and needed revisions without changing substantively those standards, especially in K-8. There were some changes for some high school standards, and those have been outlined in a memo. I did bring with me the research from Fordham, the Fordham report that came out giving Indiana excellent marks for the consistency and rigor and coherence and clarity of our standards. The only standards that scored better than Indiana's were Common Core standards. So other than Common Core, we have the highest scoring standards. So those have been submitted for your approval, and I am available for questions.
Mr. Miller?
Looks like you've highlighted the changes in here, which is appreciated. Can you just kind of speak generally to, looks like there's not wholesale changes here, but how much were changed? Why do we change them?
Yeah, so
I appreciate your sensitivity to not making too much change, but just talk about what you changed and why.
Certainly. So these standards have been being used by our educators for 6 years. So when we bring together our group, and teachers are invited to be part of that, and when we bring together our groups, we have them review those, talk about issues that they've had. We did look at Fordham's. Fordham did have recommendations, although we had great marks. They did have recommendations, so we looked at those. We had many meetings where we discussed ideas and worked to consensus with the groups that we were working with. So the changes that were made, some of them were made because they were brought to us from field educators as suggestions. We did put them out for public comment, so some were made for public comment. And there were some, especially I'll say in high school math, where there were some errors that needed to be fixed and completed, and that's why those were changed.
Any other questions or comments from board members? Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Dr. Burnett,
Yeah.
Dr. Freitas,
Yes.
Mr. Gaston,
Yes.
Mr. Mapes,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Superintendent Boyd,
Yes.
Ms. Moak,
Yes.
Ms. Rentler,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
yes,
motion approved 9-0.
Thank you. And now moving to discussion. Item A, Kokomo Transformation Zone update.
Thanks, Ms. Moat. Before the folks from Kokomo come up, over the next few board meetings, we'll be hearing updates from our turnaround academies, and I just wanted to give a quick overview of kind of what we're looking for in these presentations. Previously, we've heard and will continue to see our turnaround academies use multiple leading indicators from their buildings to inform their daily decision making. But at the board level and at the state level, given the investments we're making in these schools, we want to try to focus our evaluations of the overall intervention on those state level metrics, the standardized metrics that we know are valid and reliable at a state level. So the board approved Kokomo's transformation zone prior to the 18-19 school year. However, Kokomo had partnered with the particular expert consultant for the past 2 years, so 17-18 and 18-19. And I just wanted to flag for the board some of those high-level state standardized metrics that we're seeing within the corporation. So on the first slide is their ELA growth data across the zone. And again, a zone has a cluster of 3 schools. So this is across 2 elementary schools that feed into 1 middle school. You can see that prior to the intervention in, which is the far right column, 18-19, and then even prior to partnering with Equitable Education Solutions, their expert partner, nearly half of their students were low growth. And as we know, low growth means falling behind their peers around the state. They were regressing compared to their peers. In just 2 years for ELA, they have increased high growth, so these kids are outpacing their peers by over 50%, from 30 to 41%, and then cut low growth by almost half, just short of half. So they're already having a tremendous impact early on in the intervention on growth. Our focus will continue to be on, does that growth lead to the ultimate goal, as we know, which is proficiency. And next, at a high level, again, looking at state level metrics, wanted to just flag quickly before I turned it over to them to dig into the specifics of their intervention, the success that we're seeing initially in the first 2 years of the partnership and in the first year of intervention. Similarly to ELA, although math is not as strong in 18-19, dramatically reducing the number of low growth students, which is what we really want to see initially, because what that's saying is we're stifling the regression, we're stabilizing the instruction, and we're providing high quality instruction to kids. And that's the first step towards getting kids on a track to proficiency after years of previous underperformance. They can talk more about how they're achieving those results. And again, I want to point out that this growth in 18-19, as we all know, was achieved despite the shift to iLearn. Again, 18-19 in math saw a little bit of a dip from 17 and 18, but we're still seeing far less students in low growth and more students in that high growth area. So again, and I'll turn it over here in a second, want to focus on these state level metrics for our evaluation of the interventions, because that's the only way we can really look across the schools, because they're all using different local leading indicators. And more detail about the Kokomo zone's performance, and the other turnaround academies will be released in the performance report shortly that will come out after grades are released today, and it'll dig into several state metrics and give you all, as well as the public, a lot more information about the progress of those schools. Dr. Freitas.
What's the assessment instrument that's used to derive these statistics?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question, and this goes back to our focus. This is from the state assessment. So this is iStep and iLearn, and I think it's critical that, at least from our perspective as staff, that's what we're using to evaluate the interventions, given that's how the schools got to this place, and then the fact that all the different schools are using different leading indicators. Some may use NWA, others may use other programs.
Are you going to generate a report that includes all the schools that are in this situation?
The report released shortly. We released one last year, the first iteration. This iteration will be released in the coming days after schools are placed in grades. I will say all of the turnaround academies have already received their data and dug into this data to make informed decisions, right? So we didn't wait to communicate to them. They have taken action on this data, but as it relates to the public report of the information, that'll come out in the coming days, and then and that will include all the schools from 18-19, Dr. Freitas, and then following the 19-20 school year, that will include the schools that came on this last year.
Will your report include the letter grades?
Currently, the report includes the actual letter grades and the actual performance, not the hold harmless performance.
Okay, so that's how the reports are going to come out prior to the harmless legislation. There'll be the actual grades.
I feel it's important for the turnaround academies that are receiving a significant investment of federal school improvement dollars that we report the actual performance of the schools.
I agree. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Ron.
And I'll turn it over to the team
Thank
from
you.
Kokomo.
Good morning, everyone. Dr. Jeff Housewell, Superintendent, Kokomo School Corporation. Thank you for having us today for an update. I just found out that they put a slide in there, I think, to script me so that I'm only 1 minute. So I'm not going to look at that slide. Thank you, Dr. McCormick. Thank you, Ms. Stahlbaum. So thanks again for having us today. We're really excited about the work going on in Kokomo, and we're going to have our team here. I would like to quickly introduce our team. Dr. Mike Sargent, Assistant Superintendent, Ms. Erin Stahlbaum. She works for EES, our consultants, and of course, we brought one of our principals. We have at each of our 3 updates today, we have Dr. Lindsay Smith, who is the principal at Pettit Park Elementary. She just earned her doctorate like 2 weeks ago, so I'm going to have to
Congratulations.
I have to rephrase my how I address her. This is a celebration, and we've all had situations where we had to present data that were not great. And we had to try to find a way to put a spin on it. Today, we don't really have to do that. We're really pleased with the performance indicators and the growth that we're seeing here for Kokomo School Corporation. When I think as superintendent of some of the charges we have, we're working with our students when we boil it down, right? To know how to analyze, to know how to problem solve, how to be creative, how to communicate. And when you look through this process and you look at the complexity of what we're doing, that's exactly what it requires leaders to do. And our approach is unique. We've had to be creative because we're working within confines that exist in public school corporation. I believe we're proving that it works. We have a system of leadership in our district, and then we are working with consultants. We're working heavily with the State Board of Education, with the staff of the State Board of Education, with the Indiana Department of Education. And all of those resources together, we are analyzing and we're problem solving. And those 2 things together are allowing us to move forward. And you're going to hear about that today. You're also going to see how we're communicating that results. I was very pleased to participate in a luncheon hosted by Second Missionary Baptist Church. It's one of the traditionally African-American, historically black churches in our community on the north end near where our transformation zone takes place. And I sat in that meeting with invited guests. It included the mayor, other politicians, the director of our Chamber of Commerce, business leaders, other stakeholders. And in that meeting, I listened to the Pastor Brian Smith communicate what the transformation zone is and the success of it and what's taking place in our schools, and then what the wraparound services and requirements are of the community. It was impressive. I didn't have to say anything, which is unusual for me. So you're going to hear that today, and I think that it's important to know that we're hitting on all cylinders on this. And I know today we're going to do a deep dive into the data related to some of the performance indicators related to our academic progress and our growth, which is very important, but also know that the trauma-informed care, that the activities taking place to get us there academically, including project-based learning, as well as the wraparound support services of our community, all taking place. All within confines of a day that we have committed. We have a longer school day, 45 minutes longer every day for our children. We've added 9 to 12 days, based on the schedule and snow. We've added days to our instruction. And our teachers have embraced that, the parents and community have embraced that, and that additional time is giving us time to provide very focused, intense remediation for our students, as well as extended learning opportunities for those students who are already showing proficiency. This is all significant, and it's something that we don't see in a lot of public schools, and it is making a difference. And I'm excited today to allow the staff to elaborate on all of this and the hard work going on within our transformation zone and some of the success. So again, thank you for having us. I'll be glad to take questions at the end, but I know your time is limited, and I know that I only had 1 minute to introduce the concept of what's going on. And by my clock, it was 59 seconds plus maybe 3 minutes. So thank you. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Principal Lindsay Smith.
Hi. Kokomo School Corporation's Transformation Zone.
Dr. Smith, could you pull your mic down?
Yes, sorry, I'm short. Our transformation zone is partitioned into the 4 strands that you see on the slide: addressing barriers for student learning, optimal learning environment, teaching and learning, and talent development and operations. These 4 strands then become more granular with the levers of support underneath them. They drive our roadmap for providing all of our opportunities for learning and supporting our students in their achievement. Each action we take in the transformation zone can be traced back to these levers to ensure that our practices have a proven significance in the high academic achievement of our students. We would like to highlight a few of the celebrations we have from our extended calendar and our daily schedule. And the first and foremost is our very first day of school. We had a community rally around all of our students. With our partners at Second Missionary Baptist Church, they organized a community members coming in and cheering our students in as they entered the building. It was really quite exciting for all of the students and teachers as well. We would like to especially thank Ron Sandlin and Chad Rainey for joining us on this celebration. Thank you. We held Saturday student-led conferences, and these were hosted, again, in partnership with our friends at Second Missionary Baptist Church. We had a clothing drive that provided clothes and shoes and coats for our students from Alpha Kappa Alpha, free haircuts from our Kokomo Area Career Center, which is partnered with our high school, and our local barber shop, Crispy Cuts. We had multiple mental health and wellness and employment opportunity people there to help our parents sign up for what they need or give them resources that they need. It was a huge endeavor for all of us. In addition to that, we have a focus on ELA and math standards driven project-based learning, fostering employability skills for students, which has been provided through our additional day in each school day.
Okay, we're going to look at our benchmark goals, which are determined through iLearn. And then we're going to take you through some of our leading indicators, as we know that these are lagging. So to ensure we are holding high expectations and focusing on the work that supports our students academically, the following benchmark goals have been set in collaboration with Ron Sandlin of State Board of Ed staff. So we're looking to increase the percentage of proficiency in both math and ELA in each TZ building. And in order to hit the benchmarks of becoming at least a C in school year, or a D in school year 2021, and then a C in school year 23-24. Of note, however, these benchmark percentages serve as our minimum goal as we do strive for academic excellence all around. As a transformation zone, we do hold a high value on growth. Therefore, our growth benchmark goals reflect that principle. Of note, the growth goals for 2021 and beyond reflect the possible cap of 100 growth points in each category. And then as we have math growth goals, we also have ELA growth goals that were crafted with that same merit of capping points at 100 for the 2 benchmarks presented. As our benchmark goals serve as lagging indicators, we utilize a triangulated system of data analysis for our leading indicator collaborations that drive our individualized instruction. We were going to talk a little bit about that today. We do use iReady, so what you're seeing on the screen is Bonnier Middle School's iReady data, and I'm going to just throw some percentages out. BAMS increased the percentage of students at or above proficiency in math from the beginning of the year data to the middle of the year data by 14%. Additionally, an increase in near proficiency was demonstrated at 3%, creating a reality that 16% of our students moved out of the below proficiency category in math. We saw a huge increase in math this year. Conversely, student ELA scores demonstrated a 20% decrease in the amount of students in the below proficiency category from the beginning of the year to the middle of the year assessment, and 12% increase in students in the category at or above proficiency was actualized in ELA. That's our larger graph. If you look at the smaller graph, that's a standards mastery percentage. Standards mastery is our formative assessment that goes in the mix of the interim assessment of iReady. So it's all a part of that assessment suite. We take standards mastery for each priority standard as it comes in our sequence of curriculum, and teachers analyze that data in order to determine what remediation and/or enrichment students need so that we can continue to see an increase in our students at or above proficiency with our iReady data, which is our interim assessment we take 3 times a year. Bonnier Elementary also saw some growth with the middle of the year data from the beginning of the year data. We increased math, the at or above proficiency, from 7 to 14%, and then we lowered the percentage of students in the below proficiency category in math by 10%. And then in ELA, we decreased the percentage categorized in the below proficiency band by 12%, and those students moved into either the category of near proficiency or at or above proficiency. Again, that's our interim assessment data. We also take, along with standards mastery, which is our formative assessment, teachers have created tiered formative assessments, which are standards-based. So we've done so by breaking apart the standard into a foundational to mastery level. And then once students take that assessment, they receive a score of 1 through 4 to determine where they're at on that progression scale, and that also is included in that triangulated system of data analysis to determine where students are at for their status and then thus growth of each priority standard. Pettit Park Elementary School's iReady middle of the year data had a 16% increase in students categorized as at or above proficiency on math. And then we also have a 10% increase in students categorized as at or above proficiency, with a percentage of students below proficiency decreasing by 14% in ELA. You'll see on this screen, that's an example of a student goal setting sheet. So I had described how we use the standards mastery and the tiered formative assessment to determine what level of proficiency each student is on with each standard. And so once we do so, students are able to track their initial status and then thus growth in each priority standard. And in doing so, you can also see that they goal set as well with their teachers, which gives not only teachers a better understanding of the entire scope of the standard, but students as well.
On the screen, you can see a couple quotes from teachers, and these quotes really showcase that our assessment system that we have established through the TZ has demonstrated a rigorous standards-based instruction that occurs as a byproduct of that targeted assessment and data analysis. Our teachers are having discussions that they were not having before. They're really able to look at those standards and really understand what exactly it is truly asking. Brooklyn Marshall, one of the teachers in my building, stated, "For me as a new educator, the process of creating tiered assessments has helped me bridge the gap between what students know and what they should know. It has helped inform my teaching because I have a better understanding of the progression of the standard." And that's something we certainly are seeing. As we stated earlier, the TZ framework has 16 levers for school improvement. We would like to take this opportunity to showcase one lever from each strand that details our own progression to a competency-based education in our year 1 of implementation. The first one is lever 2, non-cognitive dispositions. In this lever, we are looking at the actions of mindsets of learning, goal setting, as we just described a few minutes ago, and classroom instruction that demonstrates metacognition, self-efficacy, growth mindset, goal setting, and employability implementation. We would like to highlight our triangulation system of data analysis with our PDSA inquiry cycle, which has allowed our teachers to engage in data analysis to drive instruction in that plan, do, study, act, inquiry cycle. With the implementation of this cycle and our triangulation system of data analysis, which you can see on the bottom of the screen, our PLC collaborations are demonstrating rich academic discourse. Teachers are talking and being student-focused and data-driven in their discussions and in their planning. As stated on the screen, the data is collected systematically through our tiered formative assessments, our standards mastery, and observation data, as we presented earlier in our leading indicators. With systematic conversations that we have, our teachers are engaging in connective inquiry in order to plan next step for students regarding remediation and enrichment. This remediation and enrichment is a direct result of the additional time that has been provided through the transformation zone schedule. Lever 5, instruction aligned to rigorous standards-based curriculum. Our actions this year have included implementation of a refined curriculum maps, where we're looking at proficiency scaled, tiered formative assessments, and core curricular elements, a triangulation system of data analysis, and an informal observation system aligned to differentiation, job-embedded coaching for instructional growth. Today, we're going to focus on something that we really strongly believe has been beneficial for both teachers and administrators in our TZ buildings, and that's our informal observation system. Through our informal observation system, which is aligned to differentiated job-embedded coaching, teachers receive weekly feedback from either the principal or our TZ director on pedagogical and instructional observations that are done in the classroom. As pictured on the right of the screen, you can see that teachers will receive a notice and a wondering from the observation. These wonderings have sparked numerous discussions for improvement, and they inform our differentiated professional development in the classroom, which is provided through our transformation zone instructional coaches. The goal of the principal and our director is in this non-evaluative walkthrough system is to ensure that our teachers are supported, that they feel that they are provided high quality, rigorous instruction to our students in the TZ, and that they have immediate feedback. On the right is an example of one that we have given to a 5th grade teacher. The transformation zone framework of strands and levers has allowed us to focus on a systems-based approach to school improvement, which has been developed and implemented in partnership with our transformation zone support through Equitable Education Solutions. As this relates to our leading indicators, you will notice that our walkthrough feedback example links to our triangulation data of system analysis that informs our competency-based instructional design.
We're almost done, I promise. We're on project-based learning, so that's lever 10. Project-based learning, some of our goals were to develop project-based learning units, and in doing so, we're talking about what performance-based assessments would look like, as our project-based learning units do uphold priority standards. We have those as the anchor, and then we use employability standards as our support. And so looking at how we are assessing those has been something very beneficial for teachers and students this year. And then also within project-based learning, we did want to have a community event to showcase our innovative design for learning, as it is new for us. Some of the highlights of our project-based learning is just the critical thinking and problem solving that's happening for not only students, but also teachers as they're engaging in this work. I did want to highlight one thing that's being done with our additional time. So in saying that we have an additional 9 to 12 weeks, one of our weeks is spring break week. So Kokomo School Corporation as a whole has 2 weeks of spring break, and the Transformation Zone has 1 week of spring break. So we really challenged our teachers to make that a complete week of innovation, and they've embraced that challenge, done an excellent job with planning, and the middle school, for example, has Shark Tank Week planned. And so students are engaging an entire week of being entrepreneurs. We ask the community to support us in that. We have several speakers coming to support our students, and then we have a celebrity panel for students to present their designs. Just that whole opportunity of project-based learning and kind of providing that environment for everyone to be able to fail during that time and trying that out has been amazing in our growth and just our mindset of learning for both teachers and students. And again, that would not happen without the additional time we're allotted with the Transformation Zone, along with the flexible transportation schedule. Lever 13, which is our last one we'll highlight, is leadership development. One of the big things about moving a school forward is upholding those teacher leaders and giving them the opportunities to grow professionally. So that's something we've really focused on in this lever. Some of the things that we've done, we've highlighted teacher leaders to lead PLC work so we can get the principals out of PLCs and have the teachers taking ownership of that. In doing so, they've been engaged in that PDSA, triangulated system of data analysis. They could all speak to that now. And in those conversations, they've noticed, you know what? We need some professional learning on some key pieces. For example, trauma-informed care. That's something that everybody needs more support on. They have the opportunity and the empowerment to come ask for that. When they ask for that, we roll it into our professional development roadmap, which is created, myself and the principals create those together. They're differentiated by building. And what's really been beneficial with the partnership with Equitable Education Solutions is that we have a network of experts to pull from when we need. So for example, on the screen, we have a picture of math intervention and then a picture of one of our consultants coming to teach students about their brain and teachers as well. So that's been highly beneficial just to have that network, and teachers know that they can come anytime and ask for certain expertise from that network. Next steps are on the screen, some of the things that we're really excited about. Although we have several next steps, we only added a few on there. One of them we're really geared up for is our employability micro-credentialing system that we're creating with Kokomo as a whole. As is evident, though, we are proud of our teachers in the TZ. They have embraced this work with deep thought, rigorous action, and positive enthusiasm. And they are consistently striving to do what's better for students.
So on behalf of Kokomo School Corporation, I just want to thank you. Boiling this down, outside looking in some ways I am, right? I mean, we really have given autonomy to this transformation zone, and they really are in more conversations and reporting more to EES, an outside consultant, and then up through to, for example, the DOE and the State Board of Education, and we're there to support. We saw growth in our academic scores at the state level during the planning year, and part of that is just the amount of professional development the teachers were receiving, beginning to make immediate changes to their instructional practices, improvements in the curriculum, the pacing guides, how they were doing their assessments. So real quickly, if you can picture this, and each week, we have teachers that are spending at least 3 hours, and they've already extended their day, right? 45 additional instructional minutes. They've already extended their day. An additional 3 hours a day. One of those is one-on-one with a coach. And that is what we want our teachers to do with their students, right? Differentiate instruction. That's providing coaching on specific strategies, next steps for that teacher based on that teacher's data. That's why I believe we're seeing significant growth. When we don't see improvements in those strategies or the growth based on data, it kicks up to our consultants. I'll see Ms. Albin will coming in, working with them. Then we're coming to strategies through some of the staff at the State Board of Education and IDOE if we don't see growth. So that's why it is an individual approach. Then an hour of a week, we have our PLCs, right, that are usually grade level teams, and there's a lot of professional development going on there. That's more, what are we doing at the first grade level, for example, fifth grade level. Then we have an hour a week minimum. I know they often schedule additional meetings, minimum of building level professional development. And it's moving, and we're working and providing to our staff the exact type of teaching that we expect our teachers to do for their students. And that, coupled with the additional time for remediation and enrichment, the additional days, and then the wraparound support you'll see through these strands. It is all hands on deck and it's comprehensive. But if you look at the model, the superintendent's over here, and we haven't mentioned the school board. School board's very supportive of this. We report back to them. Matter of fact, I shared with them some of this information that was put together by the staff of the State Board of Education, EES, and the staff in the buildings, and they're very supportive. They're excited for the growth, but they're also very hands-off. They know that this has to be an effort that cannot be led from the top down, from the traditional model with the school board. But we're excited at the results. We're very supportive of this, and we're just pleased to be where we are. And we're presenting basically 7 months worth of data on the first implementation year, and we're already seeing tremendous gains. So again, thank you. I don't know if there's time for questions. I don't want to delay your work here, and I'll yield to the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hauswald, and thank you to your team. Any comments or questions from board members? Mr. Miller?
Yeah, can I dive into the PDSA cycle a bit? I'm really interested when you talk about using data for individualized instruction, and specifically, how do we scale that? That you've got a lot of resources invested in that. How do we get every student in Indiana to have the same level of individualized attention? And what are the barriers? What have you learned from that? How can we grow that?
Okay, it takes a lot of work. So it takes a lot of capacity building of staff members. One thing that's probably understated is just how much work this is for teachers. And they're tired, they're visibly tired, but they're also asking for more. So for example, we tried to say, we want summer break, we want you to have a break. And they are saying, no, we actually want to come in, can we learn more? So it's really the buy-in of the teachers, which I know is something that is said, but maybe not always seen, and it truly is. So it's them understanding how all these pieces work together. So I will say that we had a short discussion. It's understanding how you systematically collect and analyze data, but also moving them into looking at it systemically, on seeing how all of the pieces interconnect with one another. It takes time, but it also, it's immersing them in that data analysis. It does sometimes take an outside person to be able to bring in that just lens from the outside world in, and someone who can help them make the pieces of the puzzle come together. I wouldn't say we are perfect in doing it right now, but my goodness, we are proficient. I mean, we are moving it. And when students can say, on this standard, I'm a level 2, and in order to be at a level 3, where my goal is, I need to do X, Y, Z. It takes a lot of unpacking the standard. And even students, I mean, our fifth graders and our 6th through 8, they can say in a triangulated system of data analysis, here's where I am. So it's really about having those key pillared systems in place and then bringing them together to say, this is where a student is in the learning progression.
And the second part of your question was, I heard scalability and sustainability beyond just the TZs. So I'll talk within our district and outside of our district, and I think some of the ways that that's happening already. I think please understand that the way I see it, your investment in Kokomo School Corporation Transformation Zone has already, had indirect benefits. And so that's really important. Your return on investment, in my opinion, is already beyond the borders of these 3 schools. I'll talk to you a few examples why. Within our district, we have principal meetings, we have conversations with with coaches throughout our district on this model and how we are analyzing data, how we're using this comprehensive approach for improvement, and we're implementing some of these strategies in other schools, specifically as it relates to PLCs, as it relates to individual teacher and monitoring of their growth and analyzing their data. As a superintendent comes with a math background, I sometimes find myself in this qualitative world where we live on sample sizes of 1. It's exhausting. So it is, it's story. And so, but what I see is that it's much more systemic in how some of the levers and some of the individual approaches in our TZs are being implemented now other places in our district. Let's talk about the role of EES, also the role of our researchers, and the role of the State Board of Education, in my opinion, or the staff of the State Board of Education. So I know that I'm getting lots of calls from superintendents that are working with consultants, we're working with EES, saying, hey, listen, we're moving down this road, we're not showing growth, and I understand you have a model that's working. Right? And they're having conversations with me, and sometimes they're like, well, how can we do just part of that? And I'm like, well, first of all, there's a lot of confounders in our data, and if you just do part of it, there's no guarantee you're going to get the same results, right? So it needs to be comprehensive. But the point is, some of the scalability is coming from the involvement and the unique role of consultants coming in and just, we're opening our books. They understand all of our flaws. They understand where we are and how to improve. Then let's talk about the State Board of Education staff, because likewise, they're making phone calls to State Board of Education staff. They're working with Mr. Sandlin, for example, and I see already saying, you know, what is the role you're playing in some of these pieces? Professional development, the wraparound services, the leadership. So I already am seeing that. There's a conversation to a much greater extent now than there was even 6 months ago of school systems and school leaders talking to us about what we're doing. So I hope that you're investing not just in the students and the staff in the schools in this transformation zone. I hope that we are working with consultants, researchers from Indiana State and the State Board of Education staff, for example, right, to create a model that can be implemented at lower cost. And I really do, and Mr. Stanley can speak much more in depth of the impact of this beyond the school system. Honestly, I am a sample size of one. This is my perception of the value outside of school corporations, so I would caution you in that that's just my impression of what I see happening throughout the state. But I do, Mr. Stanley can probably speak to much greater depths and much more time on what he sees the value beyond our borders. So,
Okay, thanks very much.
I think Mr. Mapes.
Can you tell me the size of each building with enrollment and the number of teachers in each one of these buildings?
I can. You want to speak to that specifically, Dr. Sargent? Our school sizes vary from about 300 to 400. And we've been very intentional in this because when we closed some of our elementary schools, about 3 of them a few years ago. We reorganized, we closed the middle school. We also then came in working with our community. There was a request that we not close the schools that are in the centers of our most vulnerable populations, with our highest poverty, our most at risk, our highest mobility, because that was the only community center. I understand if you were to look at a map, you could say, well, we could just condense these and move these to higher performing schools, which are in areas of Center Township that are a little more suburban in nature. And we intentionally didn't do that. There's been millions of dollars invested from the city on improving rails to trails, sidewalks, street lamps, walkability in these communities. That's because we've made an investment in these schools, especially for our K-5 populations. The neighborhood school model does work. So we have not increased our administrative staff as part of the process. It's really just more working with our consultants in the professional development. So
And your buildings are K5, K5?
we have actually 2 that are pre-K-5.
Okay.
And then the middle school is 6-8, and the 2 pre-K-5 neighborhood schools feed into that 6-8 building. So I hope that addresses, and we've also been expanding our preschool programs because we've adopted a countywide 75 and 5 model because our goal is to have 75% of our students ready to learn in kindergarten within 5 years. And that came based on data and research we did with Ball State University that provided us some indications that we were one of the lowest in terms of counties of population of students, 4-year-olds that were ready to learn when they entered kindergarten. So as part of that initiative, we've expanded preschool opportunities in these communities through use of our Title I dollars. So that also increases the enrollment. If you look at some of the state demographic data, it might be K-5, whereas I include some of our preschool populations when I give you those numbers. And I'm speaking in generalities, but that gives you an idea of the school sizes and their locations.
EL population?
Limited. In Kokomo School Corporation, our at-risk populations are more closely related to socioeconomic status and mobility than they are EL. Special ed populations are
Just a percentage?
19 to 20%, pretty reflective of the state. It doesn't. We don't seem to be an outlier in those populations. We tend to be outliers, or at least in terms of at-risk populations related to mobility and poverty.
And are you seeing an increase in your special ed populations in grades K1, 2?
No, actually, we're seeing a decrease. Yeah, we've implemented. If you think about some of the pieces that we're putting in place here, and we talk about the remediation, there's also a lot of time being spent, for example, on RTI, and what we're doing to make sure that we're properly assessing our students and understanding those who truly have exceptional learning needs and and those who don't. And so we're actually seeing fewer students being enrolled in special ed. So there's some cost savings if the state's listening in terms of that approach because of this comprehensive approach we put in place at these schools. So, thanks.
So I do have a quick question. So I'm putting my superintendent hat on. So you got some significant SIG dollars.
That's right.
To run this model. How important were those dollars to you?
Monumental, because it allowed us to increase the overall plan. If you look at how we're spending those SIG dollars, I mean, first of all, the research has been so important. The work with outside consultants to help us really develop a model that is different. As I talked a little bit on how this is scalable, if you look at the resources we're putting together, I think that part of the investment could be reduced for future schools who choose to invest in this model. So I do think that our request and our financial needs is probably greater than maybe school B or C or D going into this. Then I'll also tell you that when we put this together, we had additional costs in transportation and staffing, and then we've made a commitment then to add that over time, over 5 to 6 years, and absorb those costs so that this is sustainable. It would have been too large of an investment for the school district to just simply say, hey, we're going to add 45 minutes to the school day. We're going to increase the number of days. We're going to have special transportation route. We're going to have to hire consultants. We did not have the means to do that. So the startup money, if it's fair to call it startup money, I think Ron's taking a step closer to me every time I answer a question. If the startup money was monumental and instrumental, and I don't know that we could have done this without it. What I find, Jennifer and Dr. McCormick, excuse me, in school improvement initiatives, because of the limited resources, oftentimes school districts will pick one or two what we're calling levers, right? Because they can afford that. And we have 16 levers under 4 strands, and I don't know that we could have tackled all of that without the upfront investment through these federal dollars from the State Board of Education.
I just think this is so important because I know, Pat, you've been presenting as well for your district, and every time it comes to you had some type of dollars that were provided to make things possible. So when I hear the conversation that sometimes lives in our state that you have enough, it's how you spend it, never have I heard someone come to that podium where good things are happening to say, we did it without any additional resources.
That's right.
So I think that is an important point to make, that you have to have financial backing, whether it's SIG dollars or state dollars, to address some of our most at risk.
And we
So I
have
appreciate
changed
your comments.
some of the ways we're spending some of our current dollars.
Yep.
And as I mentioned, some of the scalability of this, I do believe that the costs associated with this sort of reform will be less for other districts who can take some of these resources, materials, and practices we've put in place. Because most elementary schools in the state, many elementary schools, have coaches and facilitators, and it's how they're using them, how they're changing the work they do. So I do hope that the cost will be reduced and or eliminated in the future for districts that are implementing a similar approach. Yeah. But thank you for that question.
Kudos to all of you. Good job.
Thank you.
Dr.
Yeah.
Freitas, I'm sorry.
Can I address the previous question just really quickly? Because I think it's an important point, and I think it's a valid point. But I also think it's important to point out that the Institute for Education Statistics, the United States Department of Education's research arm, put out a comprehensive report on the impact of school improvement grants coming out of the Obama administration's United States Department of Education, which really invested a lot of money in the program, really an unprecedented amount of money put into the school improvement grant program. And the reality, it was a sobering evaluation. They determined that that investment of money had no measurable impact across the board for children. So the reality is, money helps, but the conditions within which that money is being spent, the capacity, the expertise of the individuals that are using that money, and then the strategy around clustering. Dr. Hoswell just mentioned not only the clustering of schools, but the clustering of 16 levers is essential. And that's why I think it's critical that not only are we investing in the right places, but we're also being very transparent about that performance, so we don't wait and I'm not indicting Arnie Duncan's United States Department of Education. I supported that work very strongly, but the reality is only after we spent trillions of dollars we'll be able to look back and say this really wasn't a high quality investment of money. So what hopefully you'll receive from staff is ongoing real-time evaluations of these investments, so we don't have to, only have the look back at the end, the retroactive analysis. We can along the way evaluate the impact of our investments. But I do think it's critically important, and I do think that you're absolutely correct in that the money is very helpful, but money in and of itself, I think research has proven, is not enough.
Thank you, Ron. Dr. Freitas?
Congratulations to the Kokomo community and the school district. It's amazing the kind of progress that can be made when you decide to move forward as a community. Wanted to mention 3 items that are 3 of many that move schools forward. The first is the alignment of standards to the curriculum and the alignment of the curriculum to the state test. And I hear sometimes some criticism of teaching to the test. What else are we teaching to if we're not teaching to the test? The state test, as we heard earlier today, is set to standards set by teachers in Indiana. So that's what we should be teaching toward. And the reflection of that is on the state test and the letter grades that schools earn. Secondly, your presentation on data-driven statistics, reliable, summative testing data. You're right, someone mentioned, maybe it was the superintendent, sometimes we have a lot of anecdotal information, a lot of quotes, which are fine, but unless we have reliable data, then we cannot really judge the progress of schools in the state of Indiana compared to those outside of Indiana. And third is, I think, the most important item, you didn't mention by name, but I think is really critical, the will of the people to move from failure to high-performing schools. As Ron pointed out, the money helps, but you have to have the will to move the district forward. And in this case, this is a great story. I'm in the middle of doing an analysis. I call it a tale of 2 transformation zones. One is actually Kokomo, so this is timely. And the other is, I won't name the school corporation, but it's in northern Indiana, transformation zone. Yours is moving forward from mediocrity to high performing. The other is embedded in failure for many, many, many generations. And until we tackle it, generations of kids in that community are being shortchanged. And we need to do something about it. So I have 2 questions. They seem to be hung up on, and you seem to have overcome this, so I need your enlightenment. One is the teachers' unions. Somehow the teachers' union in this community is hung up on what's happening in the transformation zone, even though the transformation zone is separate from the school corporation. So could you talk about the relationship with the teachers union? Did you have that kind of debate, controversy with your teachers union? And if so, how did you overcome it?
Well, I think first, it's transparency. We talk a lot about this at the state level within our district. I know this is the conversation we're having right now. Transparency of data, transparency of actions, transparency of expenditures. We hear this, the push to make sure whether it's a public school or a virtual school or a private school, how are we spending the money and what are we using it towards? And so I think we started with the transparency of that data. And said, this is our performance, our academic performance, and this is where we are, and this is what we need. And because of that, I will tell you that it's a precarious relationship with our local bargaining unit. And part of that is, I think that there is a realization that we need to change, right? Education is changing. And we had low performing schools that we had to do something, and we wanted to intervene early. And that's the conversation I had. Early intervention will allow us to stay at the table, and I think we'll actually have a better process. I'll be interested to see your studies on, because you have lots of models on transformation zones, and the roles of public schools are going to be interesting, and how you split apart or bifurcate whether or not it's local leadership that's helping or hurting, and the role of other providers is going to be really interesting in this study. Because first and foremost, I see the State Board of Education investing in R&D, research and development. That's what you're doing here. And it doesn't mean that we're not taking serious the current students in these classrooms that are at risk. But we're doing a lot of research and development, and you have a lot of models out there. And so I think that the relationship of the local bargaining unit is important. I will tell you that it's sort of like going to the polls, right? Sometimes you just sort of hold your nose and vote. You may not love either choice, but you're looking at the options. And what I see is that it was sort of that. It was like, okay, we understand that we have to do something different. And so now what's happened is, and Lindsay can speak to this in the schools. When I'm in the schools, I don't know who all the union members are and who aren't, but I know some of them, right? And they have supported this process. Part of that is they have buy-in. Our staff members in these schools have buy-in. They see the progress being made. They see the investment we're making in their schools. Because the reality is many teachers, they are focused on their students and their school. They might care a little bit about the systemic piece, but they really care about their schools. And so the union members in those schools do see that. I will tell you, I did create controversy, I'll openly admit. We removed a discussion from 2 of the 3 schools. The other one I wasn't allowed to. And the reason is we wanted to make sure every teacher was at the table to have discussions with the principals, whether or not it was on a textbook related issue or other things that are traditionally discussable. So I did not have the support when we removed discussion. We did keep the teachers in the bargaining unit. So it was sort of a compromise, if you will. And so I think that you see support for the transformation zones in our community, first and foremost, with our parents, and then with the teachers in those buildings. You could speak to the leadership. One time I was here, I went on record saying that they supported, and they said we don't fully support the transformation zone. So I'm not saying that I have 100% support of the officers, of the leadership of the Teachers Association, but it was the right thing to do.
The other item that I'm looking at in my exploration of a tale of 2 transformation zones, one moving to high performing, one continuing to fail generations of students. And that is something I mentioned before, the will of the school board. And sounds like you've accomplished some kind of understanding with your school board. The one that's not working continues to have interference by school board, other leaders who are just undermining what's going on. And so I need your help in understanding how it works in Kokomo. How did you bring together your school board and your community in the notion that we have to change, we have to move on, we have to have the will, at least to take these certain schools, not the entire district, we're just taking out a few of the schools. How can we get school boards in all communities of transformation zones to let go and let the transformation zone do independent work to move from failure to high performing?
And it's okay if you feel that that question is beyond the scope of your knowledge.
Are you telling me that I could be stepping on landmines here?
No,
and you're giving me a free out?
How did you do it in Kokomo? How did you do it in Kokomo?
Thank you, Vice Chair. So I'll just speak to going back to a little bit what I said with unions, right? Because I'm hired by the board. I obviously work for the board, but I'm there to help. First and foremost, I'm there for the students at Kokomo and to see growth and success. I'm not there first to serve the teachers. I care deeply about our teachers. I care deeply about the board. But again, transparency. Talking to the board about where we were, the lack of growth in these schools, and saying we have to do something different. I think part of that comes in, and I see boards, I will tell you that I see sometimes people want to beat up on school boards, but I think their heart's in the right place and they really are working hard for their communities. And I think through board education and through understanding roles and responsibilities of boards versus superintendent, I think that through that we have been learning. My board has changed over time, but I've had a 7-0 board that's been fully supportive the whole time. They're in the schools when they're invited in and when I'm spotlighting something specific that we're doing, including opening day. My school board was there on opening day along with Mr. Stanlin, staff from the state board and community members and local pastors, and they understand what we're doing and they understand why it's important. And I continue to educate and go back to say this is the data and this is why we're seeing the growth in our schools. And by seeing that, right, sometimes it can be difficult to kind of go to do hands off. I'm sure every parent struggles with that point of where they start giving their child at certain ages autonomy, right? Then you look back and you see that they make the first right decision. Then they make more correct decisions. It doesn't mean periodically we don't make mistakes. But overall, the trend data is they're moving towards independence. And I think as the board has seen that, they see their role as being supportive of the transformation zone. They understand the mission and the hard work we're doing, but they also know that they're not directly involved in that. And in some cases, neither am I, right? I mean, so.
Thanks for your great story. It's uplifting and inspiring. I think as a State Board of Education, we have the responsibility to make sure every child in Indiana is getting a quality education. That's not happening in Indiana. We have pockets of students for generations who have not been served in this state. We need to do something about it. As a State Board of Education, we can't ignore those students. And so I hope we have the will as a State Board of Education to take on these communities who are not providing a quality education, not for 1 year, for 5 years, for 10 years. It's been generations we've been ignoring those students. And for the most part, they are in poor communities. The wealthy districts seem to be doing okay, but the poorer districts are not doing well. In many cases, it's not a matter of money, as Ron pointed out earlier. It's the will to make the change. And I hope we have the will as a State Board of Education to take some leadership and move all students forward to a quality education.
I grew up in rural southern Indiana on a farm, a cattle farm, and I've worked in suburban leaning districts and have always been interested in cities all through my studies and urban education. And I've been blessed for 10 years to work in Kokomo in urban education. And I have come to understand what you were saying, and that just throwing money without metrics and without research and without a plan doesn't work. But my last parting word is I have come to deeply understand that it does cost more to educate students that are at risk. We know that. The research, there's a preponderance of evidence, including some work being done right now from Dr. Takushi at the University of Georgia. It costs more to educate students of poverty or at-risk students, including EL, students high mobility. And that's really, really tough work because our population resets in some of our schools not on a 12-year basis, not 1/12 every year. In some of our high poverty schools, the population resets every month. That's really, really challenging work. So we don't know, research does not know how much more it costs. We just know it costs more. So there is probably, in my opinion, what I see, a split between the systems, the metrics, the intentionality behind the work we do with the money we have and the amount of money. So I'll leave that with you. So
You can just follow me over to the State House afterwards. Come on over.
I'm heading back to Kokomo.
Come on.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments or questions from board members?
One more thing, Jeff. Congratulations of making the transition that you're student-centered instead of adult-centered, because that's what makes the difference. I don't care what we sit here and do. Local school boards have to trust the leader who's been hired to do that, to focus on the students, and the adults are there to serve the students. And that's what you've created in this transformation zone, and that's the reason you're having this success. Teachers and administrators want to serve kids, that's why we got into this business. But at times, adults get in the way from that happening, and that's the reason you have years and years of kids not being able to achieve where they need to be. We have a lot of great leaders in the state of Indiana when given the tools and the kind of regulations out of the way to serve their kids. And when you get that, your district will thrive no matter their level of poverty and or their level of academic performance where it's been before. This is just an example of that. So,
Pat, what you're saying, thank you. What you're saying is on my wall, I only know 2 quotes from Eleanor Roosevelt. One was, I think, when she was down at Iguazu Falls, she said, "My poor Niagara." The second thing she said was, "Great minds talk about ideas, average minds talk about events, and small minds talk about people." And that's, I'm paraphrasing probably, but that's on the wall in my office. And when people come in and we start talking about people, right, then there's no sustainability there because the people are going to change. What we've talked about today are ideas. We've talked about ideas for how you improve education in Indiana. And that's the focus of this. When Ron calls me, when EES calls me and the principals bring me data, we talk about ideas for improving. We talk about the data and what it say. We don't talk about specific people. That's really, right? Teachers talk about people because in terms of their students and the staff. That's down at the building level. You know, I don't try to get involved in HR, and I remind my board that we don't need to be the world's largest HR departments. That really is the role of that. And when we strip that away, what you're saying is exactly right. We focus on the students and we focus on the ideas for improving education. If we continue to keep the conversation there, rather than maybe like things like HR, I think that our work will be sustainable because I tell them that, you guys won't be here in 20 years. I may not be here in 20 years. In terms of these current roles, the people are going to change. Our lasting impact are on the ideas and what we do in terms of the initiatives related to that. I completely agree with you. Thank you, Pat.
Great conversation. We'll go ahead and conclude it now. Thank you for your presentation. We really appreciate it, and congratulations on the progress made thus far. That concludes our agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
1-0.